All right, welcome back. Some Bayou Time news coming out of Lafourche Parish, and deputies with the sheriff's office and under Sheriff Craig Weber were able to recover $122,000 from a local phone scam victim. And we are joined now by the sheriff of Lafourche Parish, Craig Weber. And Sheriff, first of all, good to see you. How are you, sir?
Martin, I'm doing well, man. It's good to see you as well.
And what a big recovery. Tell me about this recovery, because you hear 5,000, 10,000, but 122K, that's pretty big.
And very rare. That's one of the things I want to stress. The amount of people that are scammed out of money is increasing exponentially. The ability to recover money is very rare. In this particular case, the victim had been contacted by someone imitating a federal agent, an inspector general agent, and provided the victim with convincing credentials, a picture of their credentials, their badge, and themselves, gave her some very specific information, and made her in fear of losing her Social Security. And she actually wired money, which is unusual. Because she wired money, we were able to get a seizure warrant once we identified through a search warrant the routing and the bank account number. So the seizure warrant allowed the banking institution to freeze the account. And at the time they froze the account, there was $122,000 left in there, which ultimately was returned to the victim. At one point, that account had over $600,000 from a variety of victims in different states throughout the country. But because there was actual money wired as opposed to Bitcoin or debit cards, we had a much higher success rate. And really, the key there was expediency. As soon as the victim recognized that they had probably been scammed or defrauded and contacted the sheriff's office, it really gave us an opportunity to get those warrants issued and get in the front of the line. Because if one of the other victims had done a similar thing, they might have gotten what was left in the account instead of the victim in Lafourche.
You're absolutely correct. It is rare, and I don't recall ever being on this news desk and covering a scam of that nature for that amount of money. So these thieves are getting brazen, aren't they?
Well, they're getting braver and they're getting smarter, and they're manipulating people's familiarity with technology, and they're manipulating their unfamiliarity with technology. Older people may just now be getting into smartphones or doing banking transactions online, and they may not be as attuned to what's legitimate and what's not legitimate from someone who grew up with technology. Usually, a victim is motivated initially by one of three things: fear, which is what we had in this case. This victim was motivated by the belief that some federal enforcement agency was going to take away her ability to get Social Security, which she relied upon if she didn't send this money, wire this money. Another motivation is greed. There are people who fall for the old adage, if it's free, nothing in life is free. It's too good to be true. It usually is. But there are still times where people paint a rosy picture, and people fall into that trap as well. And the third thing that generally motivates people on the front end is love. People use the internet as a way of meeting friends and meeting romantic interest. And oftentimes there are people posing as someone who is interested in you. We had a victim 2 years ago or a year and a half ago who I think ended up getting scammed. Initially, it was a love interest, and then it became a recover my money interest, and using cryptocurrency, because the cryptocurrency, once you put the money into the exchange machine, that's nearly impossible to recover. And there was another $100,000+ of scam going on. Fortunately, most scams are for much smaller amounts. There are people who, will scam you for $1,500, $1,000, $500. But if you do that 100 times a day, that's a pretty good take, $100,000.
Yeah, so we definitely want to, let people be aware of that. Let me do this with about 2 minutes left on this segment.
Okay.
I do want to come back for another segment because I want to talk about that you're running again for sure. But let me ask you about you're launching a comprehensive effort to battle opioid addictions in Lafourche Parish. What's your plan there, Sheriff?
So Martin, every city, village, parish, county, state has seen the ravages of opioid addiction and particularly fentanyl, with people dying at exponential rates. We can only do so much on the front end. We work hard to enforce narcotics laws. Our deputies carry Narcan to revive people, but we really need to get people into treatment. I doubt that you can find a family that has not in some way been impacted by addiction directly or indirectly. And that's going to continue to expand. This grant, which is a federal grant to the Department of Justice, allows us to deal with people at the point of their addiction. We have two people that are going to be working in the field. And every time there's an overdose response where a person survives, obviously if they don't survive, one of these officers is going to meet with the individual and meet with the family and hopefully use that near-death experience as a wake-up call and try to connect them with services, whether it's inpatient, outpatient, or whatever the case may be, to make them come to the reality. The second area where Project COPE, the Comprehensive Opioid Prevention Effort, is going to operate is in a jail. And I don't think I have to convince you or anyone else that many people who get arrested and commit crimes do it as a result of supporting an addiction. So as they come in, if we can identify that, and in some cases it's pretty easy because they come in and we have to detox them. But in other cases, we just have to go through a social history. We think that's another opportunity to try and get them to the realization that the way they're living is certainly not, is counterproductive, and that there are ways that they can break the cycle. And there are services both inside the jail and outside the jail in the community that can help them along with their support system.
And I guess part of it is reactive, but you're trying to get it to a proactive state, but you almost have to be reactive to get it there, don't you?
Well, you do have to react to the fact that a person has some episode, whether it's an overdose or an arrest. But the proactive is, look, somebody has to try something. I can't guarantee this is going to work. We have a wonderful steering committee made up of the stakeholders of the criminal justice system and providers and other community partners. And the great thing about this grant, it's 3 years, it's a little over $1 million, but we can tweak it. If we see one approach is not producing great results as we had hoped, we can, with the benefit of experience and the brain pool of the people that are assembled, we can try other approaches. But regardless, we're being proactive. We're trying to get out there at a time where a person maybe is in a position to recognize they need help.
I want to switch gears. I want to use the last half of the show to talk about you have been one of the fortunate elected officials who gets to spend over 30 years in the same spot. And I remember me and Lonnie Thibodeau were talking a little while ago. He did one of the early interviews with you way back when. There was a young sheriff candidate, Craig Weber, and 30 plus years later, you're again running for re-election. Just your thoughts on that.
Martin, it has been such an unbelievable, phenomenal blessing and honor to serve at this capacity. And I say that because I serve with such talented men and women, like that case we just talked about where that money was recovered. I mean, I am just blown away at the level of intellect and the tenacity that these officers have, knowing that if they work here, they can work many other places in the private sector, make great money. I also serve a wonderful community. Lafourche is my home. I was born and reared out there in the banks of Bayou Rumpelpon and Bayou Buff. I went to public school, went to Nichols University. I've always worked in law enforcement in Lafourche Parish. It's my passion. Justice is my passion. And I'm just as passionate today as I've ever been. Having started back in 1992, cell phones were barely available. We have seen, and I use the example of the technological explosion, AI, for example, artificial intelligence, cryptocurrency, digital evidence. So many of the crimes that we're solving today and that we're preventing as well are the result of understanding and using digital evidence, everything from camera systems to iPhones to tracking phones to social media, seizure warrants. I mean, it's a whole new horizon. That was hardly even imaginable back in 1992. And victim services was a big plus. Domestic violence, we made great strides in the area of domestic violence. And taking firearms away from people who would harm innocent victims, giving them places through search warrants or shelter areas and support systems where they can come forward and be protected. Hurricanes, my gosh, my first term, Hurricane Andrew was where I got in and looked for the hurricane response, and it was an old dusty 3-ring binder with Bobby Tardo's name on it. So we've just advanced in so many different areas. We have a mature workforce. We serve a wonderful people. I have a great passion. I look forward to embracing that. A great accomplishment was the correctional complex. The people of Lafourche Parish recognized this need. And that's part of, as I call it, maybe the most unsung, unknown crime prevention strategy. If we want to, if we have to acknowledge and recognize crime is increasing across the country and across the state. Places like Lafourche and Terrebonne are fortunately not as impacted. While we may have seen some impacts or some increases, by and large, the people don't have to modify their daily practices because they have good citizenry and they have good law enforcement, and law enforcement are well supported by those people. And we want to protect that. It's by no accident that Lafourche and Terrebonne and the surrounding parishes are generally a lot safer than some of the other larger urban jurisdictions that you hear about on the news every single day. But we want to continue to be steadfast. We want to embrace technology and technological advances. I'm excited about the concept of the real-time crime center that we're on the process of breaking ground on and moving into it to where we can assimilate, we can recruit, we can get data, we can manage that digital evidence that I talked about. I think our crime prevention strategy, while people are in our correctional facility, we have direct control over there and care and supervision over them. So we can either squander that opportunity, let them get out with no treatment, with no programming, with no identification of needs and risk, and they'll recidivate and they'll continue to commit more crimes and have more victims. Or we can be smart about the time that they're with us, and we try to use proven strategies and intervention strategies and training and reentry initiatives to help them break that cycle of living a life sentence 30 days at a time. So Martin, the future is bright. I'm optimistic. I've lived through a lot in 30 years. I've worked with some of the most talented people. We have great institutional knowledge. And for 30 years in office, I can proudly say that this has been a scandal-free office. It's been a scandal-free office because we're committed to being transparent. We're committed to being accountable. We make sure that our people are held accountable. And in turn, that translates into the office that I'm so proud of, and one that's nationally accredited, one that has accomplished quite a bit. So I am eager and excited to get out and meet the voters, because they're new voters. They're people who are coming of age, who were born after I was sheriff, and I may be the only sheriff they've ever known. But I want them to make sure they know me on a personal level and they know what I stand for, what I believe in. Like I said, my very first campaign back in 1991, I coined the phrase, good people deserve good government. And here we are 31 years later, and that rings us true today as it ever did. Good people deserve good government, and we're going to continue to give them good enforcement. We're going to make sure Lafourche Parish is safe and secure. We're going to keep those officers in our schools to protect our schools, and we're going to be on the cutting edge of law enforcement as it evolves.
Sheriff, we appreciate you joining us today. Congratulations on solving the cases. Congratulations on running again. Always good to see you, my friend. Take care.
Thank you, Martin. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right. There you have it with the Sheriff of Lafourche Parish. We'll take a short break. We'll be back with more. Don't go away.